Hey guys, what's happening? This is Junaid on the Hacks and Hobbies episode. I know you're like, wait, we just got done watching you do a live stream with Michael Fortenberry. What are you doing here again? Well, guess what? I had two back-to-back bookings, and I've got to pay respect to this guy coming up. So hang tight. I'm going to do the intro, and then we'll get right into the episode. There he goes. Welcome back to the Hacks and Hobbies podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Robbie Phoenixx Zeas, a Fortune 100 C-level award-winning competitive intelligence expert. Not just somebody, he's an intelligence expert, and we'll get deeper into it. Now, Robbie has an impressive track record, having worked with industry giants like Verizon, AT&T, Lumentech, and Live Nation, contributing over $254 million. That's $250 million, earning more than 30 million song plays along the Daytime Emmy submission in his debut sync. He's also a keynote speaker who shares his expertise on leveraging creative advantages to become competitive advantages. You know, this is why I like AI voices, because they don't make mistakes like I do. Robbie has contributed to major conferences like the Future of Cable Business Services in New York, the Global Innovation and Leadership Summit in Silicon Valley, and the Global Legal Business Development Conference with over 40,000 attendees worldwide. I don't know what it looks like when there's 40,000 people in one place, but I have ridden a bike when there was 30,000 people riding on bike through New York, and that was a lot of fun. Robbie, thanks so much for coming out to the podcast, man.
Junaid, thank you for having me, brother.
You know, we've known each other for some time, and we haven't met in person yet, but we've talked over phone, we've talked over Zoom for some time, we've connected other friends to each other, and I just love your energy, and I love that you come from a music background. Being able to play music, I just know how to sing, but you played all sorts of instruments, and it's a huge inspiration for me. So, I'm really honored to call you a friend.
Oh, Junaid, you're so kind. Equally, there are very few podcast hosts that do it the way you do. You're always so insightful and delightful. That's the bottom line. And I know one day we will meet. I give you my complete fidelity and word on that, my friend.
Absolutely. You know, Robbie, I want to learn about your background and how you got started. And now I already know, but people listening to this episode might not have heard of that. So talk to me about how you got started in the world of competitive intelligence.
I always say keep it loose and keep it real. So for your audience, I'm putting no pretenses on here. I started broke, moving to my in-laws' house from Maryland to Philadelphia circa 1996. And I was just finishing my undergrad degree. And I was in and out of undergrad for years trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up one day. However, I met what was going to be my absolutely beautiful future wife and said, I kind of need to get it together doing something. So it so turned out that I started a part-time job as a temp to hire in a competitive local exchange carrier called ATX Communications. And they were out of Ballackinwood, just outside of Philadelphia. And I came to know their senior executive who was in the office that I was supporting. And long story short, I was first dipped into the world of telecom and tech, apprenticing in that role for a period of a couple months.
Hmm.
Then I moved into looking for full-time positions. Well, I could have gone union, I could have gone management at Bell Atlantic. The fate of the draw was the interview for management went so exceedingly well, despite my best intentions, because I really wasn't sure where I wanted to place myself, and ended up accepting a role at a very low level management sales position at Bell Atlantic that led to multiple promotions, that led to being a top salesperson nationwide, that led to going into engineering. And in the engineering realm, when I was assigned to Philadelphia over a couple of years into that role, promoted, I become aware of not only ATX Communications, yet also AT&T and Comcast, and many others that were competing in the Philly market. And because I was a former sales guy, now in a tech role, I looked at things radically differently than most engineers, which was to say, what is the competitive landscape? Why is it the way that it is? What are they doing for a comparative advantage, and how do we get around that and maybe beat them at their own game?
Hmm.
That's what led me into competitive intelligence ultimately, was the passion to connect sales and engineering into the client application and understand how to beat them on the ground in Philadelphia as a starting point.
And that's such a very interesting journey for sure. And I hate to say this, but it was all for a girl,
Yes, it really was.
right?
And she's still my very own, thank goodness.
Thank God, man. The things that we do for love, it's absolutely something that people are like, wait, how did you go from that to this? I'm like, well, it's the truth. We all do the things that we do, and I think there's a little bit of, I think there's a lot more that you're not sharing. Talk to me about how you blend your expertise in competitive intelligence with your passion for music and performance, because I mean, I see that guitar behind you, so there's a reason for that for sure. So talk to me about that.
Well, I think really it's the rudiments of what someone had asked me recently, what really keeps me awake and what gives me the passion to exceed and to excel in anything that I do. And the bottom line really comes from a place of love and understanding. Like
Mm.
for my wife, I had to prove I could make it through undergrad. So in 11 months, I completed 50 credits. That's almost half the degree in 11 months flat.
Wow.
And I took a nearly $20,000 loan out to do that, by the way. Yet I was more than happy to do that. It was kind of the commitment level I wanted to show her and God that I could
Mm.
be a man and be entrusted in a covenanted relationship. I think it was no different at Bell Atlantic and what became Verizon as an employer for me over time. They enshrined me in a low level sales role. So what? Let me prove myself to them in some way that was meaningful to them. So I was blowing out the sales numbers from, I think it was 112% of my goal the first partial year that I served. And then I went, was it 430% of the goal the following year? And then I did over 840% of the goal. I was on track for 840% of the annual goal
Holy smokes.
inside of the first quarter of the following year. So, it really comes from a place of passion. And I also say, similarly, in the competitive expert realm, it was no different. When I was assigned to Philadelphia, the team was at 43% of their objective year to date in around April of that year. And the field sales manager had put a lot of trust in me, having been a former top salesperson nationwide, to kind of bring the team into the discipline of, hey, it's not acceptable to come into a funnel review and not have sold anything that week. But also, what do you do to compete on the ground? And I was studying AT&T's cost models in Philly for what they call their AccuRing service. It's basically a fiber optic service that's very high end for enterprise, and noting that they were focusing on lower linear mileage runs to buildings that they didn't serve on net.
Hmm.
Yet the discounts of those rings were huge because the linear mileage was less,
Yeah.
lower cost to rent from us, Verizon, and they undercut our enterprise prices because we had to do statewide averaging or at least metropolitan averaging, and our costs on average were higher at retail. So that became part of the genesis of, hey, we can kind of mix it up and use creative advantage for a competitive advantage by understanding their approach and reverse engineering to beat them at the door, meaning at the building itself. And how do we discount the services that ride the IntelliLight rings that were our equivalent
Yeah.
fiber optic services for enterprise? So that's kind of the short and long answer is you look at the passion piece, you look at the way others are approaching the market, you engineer something that is taking some learning humbly from their paradigm, and
Mm.
you bring it into the fold so that it becomes a very powerful narrative for management, which
Nice.
led to my joining marketing eventually over multiple rounds of that type of advisory briefings to senior executives that led to
Mm.
the competitive intelligence function actually being formally named in the business unit. It
Wow.
was a $2 billion annual revenue stream that I was co-managing with others in that marketing line. And I had a very small piece of it to start with, no staff, no budget. That over time, because of the quality work we were doing, led to a $1.6 million P&L that I was directly responsible for, and a staff of up to 6 direct and indirect reports.
Dude, that's definitely something not that's something not to balk at, because I mean those are some powerful numbers. Now, you've had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest names in the industry, like you mentioned, Verizon, AT&T. What has been one of your most memorable projects or achievements so far?
It's funny when you're on a marketing line, and we had many seasoned, let's say, product management that were there in the company, let's say 20 to 30 plus years in some cases. And these guys knew a lot. They knew a lot about how to look at forecasts and market growth and CAGRs and all these things that were rudiments in learning. And keep in mind, I was doing custom research for the senior executive team. So I
Mm,
had to learn these things relatively quickly with a level of competency and presentation skill coterminously with the role I was managing functionally nationwide.
yeah.
So it was a lot to stir in the pot. Now, the reality with a lot of the product managers are they've been there forever. And some of those cats are not particularly fond of innovation or change management. Well, it so happened one of the product managers had a very, let's say, sexy product
Mm-hmm.
whose forecasts were growing leaps and bounds by the analyst community for years. It happened to be an Ethernet service. And this particular product manager had zero intention on competing except at his desk. He wanted to basically use his desk as a deal desk. He gives special breaks and recommendations to custom pricing to try to jam through a sale at a time. Meanwhile, the market in aggregate is growing such that there's no way this guy can actually keep up with the competition growing at double digit around
Yeah.
us, which led to some occasional, let's say hot debates within the management pool of to how we innovate and get this product kind of going to the double digit growth rate we would hope could happen. So I led an effort behind the scenes through the union shops to go and look at the available fiber to light Ethernet services in
Mm-hmm.
Verizon. And it so happened there was one person in the entire Eastern region that knew how to do this. It was a guy named John Bogan who worked out of Delaware, who ran a query in the facilities assignment tool. And I'll kind of keep it private to Verizon as to how exactly we did this.
Of course.
Ultimately, we found a way to exactly identify the suitable fiber for Ethernet services to be provisioned day one. A service order would be written
Mm,
to be able to basically offer services in that building and to cross validate that there was an Ethernet switch that was available for that building,
yeah.
incidentally, and a multiplexer. So it ultimately came down to instead of relying on the forecast team like the IDCs, Frost and Sullivan's, Yankee Groups, Gartners of the world to say, hey, Verizon, you've got X% market share. You should compound on your growth rate should be Y. So X plus something.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do a bottoms up view and say, what are the facilities that in fact can grow day one? And also what can compete at price? Because we already knew what the competitors were pricing.
Yeah.
Now we know where the services are offered. And that led to a rather innovative approach. And I'll say that was one of the most memorable projects because it really forced the hand of the product teams to look at things radically differently rather than looking, hey, we're Verizon, we're huge, we're everywhere. It's like, where do we compete effectively? What's the addressable market, in fact, rather than just talking in platitudes year
Yeah.
over year, how big we are.
No, that's really, really powerful. I mean, to be able to pull something like that requires a ton of brain power, and you're able to bring that together with a team, and it's not a single person effort, right? It's a team effort. So
Oh, completely. Yeah.
absolutely.
And companies that size, you have to rely on others as well.
Mm-hmm. 100%. So talk to me about how did your journey lead you to contribute to major conferences like the Future Cable of Business Services and the Global Innovation and Leadership Summit?
So, Future Cable Business Services, I'll just put a shout out to my friend, Alan Bresnick, who's still an editor to this very day at Light Reading. And he had encouraged me because he had seen me hiring suppliers for, let's say, geo solutions that complemented some of the marketing planning that we were doing at the time to kind of geo target service promotions and things of this nature. He also saw me looking rather closely at the cable competition. And that was a formal assignment that senior leadership had assigned as of 2006, in fact. And they were really, really curious how the cable companies grow into business services. They were eyeballing the fact that $300 million was earmarked from Comcast alone through the Roberts family, including their CEO at the time, to grow business services. So there was a lot of this dust getting kicked up in the marketplace, and I was on top of every step of the way as
Nice.
to how they were innovating and able to expand products and so on. Ultimately, I was asked to be a part of a forum in New York because they also knew I led the competitive intelligence unit at Verizon Business, and they wanted to learn more about basically how Verizon may approach the marketplace,
Hmm.
anything else they could glean, they were all about. So I joined that cadre year over year. Alan had me come back and back and back. Now, keep in mind, I'm a senior manager in Verizon, yet I'm speaking with people who literally are presidents and CEOs and SVPs of our peer competitors. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, who's this kid coming in and knows
Hmm.
anything against these guys that have 20 years on him and experience and like,
Yeah.
2 and 3 levels of titles up above me. But they saw that I was erudite enough, I guess, to keep up. That led to other opportunities to go to Silicon Valley to speak. And that was over another Fortune 100 company that actively
Nice.
recruited me that became Lumen Technologies. And then, of course, the Global Innovation Leadership Summit was a lot of fun there because it was a think tank for future road mapping, strategic planning in the real sense, not just the tactical and operational stuff I'd been doing for years.
Amazing.
And that led to another opportunity, as you mentioned, 40,000 attendees at the Legal Business Development Summit.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And it just kept going from there.
Dude, that's some serious work for sure. I mean, like you said, you finished. You did 50 episodes. Was that 50 units in 11 months? That's mind blowing. So being able to bring that kind of passion and energy to the company, to business, to corporate sector, nobody's putting that kind of energy in there. So absolutely. Can you?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people look at big companies like that, especially tech companies
Mhm.
that were independent local exchange carriers from their legacy, and look at people and go, are they plants? Do they really innovate? Do they really work as hard as they say that they
Yeah.
have? And I assure you, from literally the first month or two in my role, all the way through that career, it was constantly pushing myself to innovate, constantly pushing myself to learn new things broadly, not just in the function, to team as effectively as I could in the roles that I had,
Yeah.
and ultimately to make a lot of good people around me really happy in their work because it's the type of ride that you do that counts in life. It's not the ride itself. So, another anecdote, I brought in $52 million into the company in 6 months flat at Verizon
Nice.
from a program they were going to potentially scrap. It was earning about 8 million a year, and I made it $100 million revenue earner in 6 months flat by innovating and having a broad team that was national around that effort.
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, Junaid, AT&T, you just mentioned Live Nation and others, Broadcom I could mention, and many others. It all comes down to teaming. It all comes down to dedication.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to really going outside the dotted lines and not stick with a script that's politically correct because the pressure's on the business. You got to be willing to take some risks.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to take the right risks and measure it as you go along.
I love that, man. That's so powerful. That's so mind blowing. Because why not? I've been running in circles. I've been in my head like how do I even respond to this? But you've spoken at major conferences and leadership summits. Talk to me about what are some of the key strategies you teach business leaders to maximize their performance.
I mean, honestly, the whole word leadership to me is a hollow word without authenticity. So the first thing I encourage the senior executive hiring team
Hmm.
is to look for authentic people in their business, regardless of title and business unit. Look for people that have an authentic background, that have something to prove. It's not just enough to have lived an authentic sales leadership role, let's say, in the humble way that I could. I wasn't a formal title with leadership, mind you. I just led the results nationwide for 3 years, and I had a certain reputation for it. So it wasn't really title. It was more about the pragmatics of what were the results. Did they also have the passion? Did they care for the business enough to go out of the way and do things radically differently in some way that innovated or did it differently, let's say.
Yeah.
So for me in sales, it was using postcards. It was literally sending mass emails. It was literally sending mass servers to the point I almost blew up the server in the center one year. And literally people were not too happy about that because they're all counting on it, you know?
Of course.
It's putting more RAM in my computer or using macros for the legacy applications I was running coterminously with all the workflow that was coming in. It was
Mm.
bringing service records home where appropriate on weekends and evenings during the week and on holidays to make sure that I kept a certain flow in my funnel to have the results I mentioned earlier. You know, that's the first thing I'd say is authenticity and passion is where the companies need to be looking. The second part is to what extent are they valuable inside the business at the time the business needs you?
Mm-hmm.
Because let's just be real. You don't always want an executive that is in marketing that comes from a marketing bubble or a technology bubble necessarily. How about someone that was leading in the sales role that understands the cost of marketing going a little too slow? Or maybe marketing having a back funnel or a backlog of work
Yeah.
that stifles build revenue, for example. So it's important to look at broad-banded functions in leadership, not just the passion and the authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have leaders that understand the business from a cross segment point of view, if possible. And the third thing, more than anything else, as I'll always say in all of my keynotes, leverage that creative advantage for your competitive advantage. Because
Yeah.
guess what? Americans know better than any other culture, it seems, that I've been in contact with over my travels globally that can really have an opportunity to incubate innovation and bold and creativity to yield the results that are pretty phenomenal. You
Yeah.
know, you look at people like Tesla, you look at people like, you know, let's say, go back a ways, Watson, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
telephones, like way back when.
Yeah.
We could go through many, many, many examples of this innovation. And tell me another country where that is really, truly embraced
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately can be successful, even though it's a competitive landscape, surely for everyone involved.
Man, that's so true. There's been a lot of innovative ideas for sure coming out of the U.S. Hundreds of years ago because if you think about it, they were all entrepreneurs. We didn't have the systems that we have in place right now. In this time and space, only 0.7 to 0.9% of the U.S. population are entrepreneurs that are starting new businesses. That's mainly because there's so many systems in place in that the government has put in place so that you don't really need to think about innovating. And if you go to other countries like Australia and Canada, and that's how you're traveling worldwide, you see there's so much innovation. There's so many new entrepreneurs jumping in, making it real. Now, you've achieved a lot in both the business and creative worlds. How do you balance the two aspects of your career?
I don't know that I do. I'll be honest. I really wonder if I ever balance anything because, look, the reality is every few months, like I'll give another example in the historical careers.
Mm-hmm.
We started a server of custom pricing. Now, this isn't pricing you get from a supplier or a research firm that you hire external.
Yeah.
This is literally from the ground up, from scratch internally in the company. We started on a SQL Server Lite package on a PC tower that was sitting in a vacant office.
Yeah.
Over time, we scaled it to bring in 157 million geocoded relational records to the company.
What?
And we created we created all the logic for it. We created all the querying and reporting for it. We leveraged that into Tableau to visualize it. And ultimately, it was awesome. Like literally, if we had a competitive deal anywhere in the world, the chances are for the top, say, 400 competitors, we
Mm-hmm.
could price comparable services and give our leadership an expectation what the deal might want to look like in
Yeah.
the way of promotions, discounts, structure, et cetera. And this is just another example, right? You've got to be able to willing to go to the mat and not just call data analytics because someone spoon fed you terabytes of data that are millions of records, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to build it the right way yourself. And that's being an entrepreneur inside of a big company
No, 100%.
that typically you're not rewarded for, right? You're typically not
Yeah.
rewarded as a Fortune 100 employee to go, hey, go build something innovative and we'll
Mm-hmm.
give you this giant equity stake and a bonus at the end of the year.
No,
It was
no
for
thanks.
doing it the right way for the
Yeah,
right reasons.
no, 100%. And you're absolutely right. Even though there you might not see a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of entrepreneur mindset inside of large corporations and companies, and that's 100% true. And that means that you're thinking outside the box. You're bringing in your brain and not just your back. And I got that quote from the last guest that I had, Michael Fortenberry. You know, workers are no longer bringing their backs only to do the work; they're also bringing their brains, and that's how you empower a really good workforce. Now, let's
Absolutely.
let's take a quick break, and when we come back from the break, you're gonna have a few hacks, actionable hacks for our audience that they can implement in their lives.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, it's been fun hanging out with you on this podcast. But let me tell you something. Technology is where it's at if you want to really level up your production quality for when you do podcasts, for when you do video content for your YouTube or your TikTok or your stories. And one way that technology has helped me create this show and many videos that I post on my YouTube is all thanks to Ecamm Live. Now, this software is so powerful. With their latest beta version that I'm testing right now, they've put the entire workings of Zoom application inside of Ecamm Live. So I don't even need to run a separate version of a separate copy of Zoom. I can literally start Zoom meetings from within Ecamm Live, showcase all of my space, showcase all of my PowerPoints and documentation, and create this really cool looking setup because Ecamm Live lets you do that. And it's a really powerful software with multi streaming technology, and it's just really cool. And they've got a really powerful community that are right there to help you figure out any issues that you might run into. So check out Ecamm Live when you get a chance. The links in the bio. The links in the bio. Nobody says that anymore. The links is in the show note. But thanks for listening, and we're gonna jump back into the episode with Robbie. Robbie, it's been so much fun talking with you on the podcast. Creative intelligence, competitive intelligence, creative mindset, passion, corporate advancement. Like, there's so many things that you're bringing to the table. What are the 3 actionable hacks that you can share with our audience that can help them implement these strategies that you've discussed with us?
First things first, before becoming the ninja, understand the landscape.
Hmm.
Honestly, like a lot of people in companies follow the financials very, very closely. They're
Yeah.
very consumed on their internal frame, yet they're not always so well versed when they look externally. So knowing the landscape is key. It's not just the revenue lines and say the EBITDA for your peer group is what you consider your peer competition. Think of your indirect competition, in particular the innovator segment. Think of those guys out there that are maybe have sub $100 million revenue shares. If you're a large company, for example,
Hmm.
yet they're rising sequentially quarter over quarter significantly. What are they doing? Is it their distribution chain? Is it their sales partner or alliance program? Is it a merger and acquisition? Is it intellectual property and so on? So know the landscape before you want to be ninja is my first advice to anyone. And really know it well from an external perspective, particularly because a lot of people can always talk to the internal numbers and what the cost of goods sold might be, or what the SG&A burden looks like, quarter over quarter, et cetera,
Yeah.
or why sales is meeting expectation, exceeding, or a little underperformance, let's say, and a little soft. But really get to know the external lens particularly. And the second thing I would say as a hack is, as I mentioned before, be authentic. Don't accept because you're a say VP, SVP, or soon to be named vice president of sales, that because the company is in Salesforce, that's the dogma you need to follow. Don't accept the status quo. Question it. ask yourself, what intelligence are you really gaining out of Salesforce and all the ancillary modules you bought into that someone years before you made the decision on?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, is the analytical frame around your marketing lenses correct? Right? Do we have the right intelligence? Is it unique to say what Comcast or Charter is using, or for that matter, Live Nation, AEG, or Sony? Look at your landscape and understand the data analytic science within your particular sub industry and know it well. Because I guarantee you, there are always opportunities for improvement. And I mean that broadly, not just a particular set of individuals in a
Mm-hmm.
function, but as a business practice. So that's the second thing, is being authentic, is this looking at the understanding of your data
Yeah.
and making sure within industry you're actually in the best practice checkbox.
I
And
love
then the
that.
third hack I would say absolutely is pour your passion into it. You know, don't be passionate for passionate's sake. Be genuine in your passion, serve it well, serve it broadly and equally to all, but at the end of the day, have some passion in the fact that you're there. Let people know that you care. Let people know that you're connected not just to the business, but in fact, the people themselves. And those would be my three hacks to offer.
Man, I love that. So understand the landscape around you, not just what you're doing on the inside, but what everybody else is doing. So you basically don't forget the forest for the trees, right? Does that make sense?
Correct.
Be authentic. Be the tree. Be authentic as you can. Don't try to be somebody else because everybody else is taken, right? And
Right.
pouring our passion into it. I think that one is a really powerful one because when you bring your passion, you start caring about the people around you. You start caring about um, everything that you're working on and everybody that's there that's working on because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have the same need. We all eat from the same place, no matter the color or no matter the position in our company. We'll all eat from the same place and do it the same way. So I love those hacks, man. Those are fire. Talk about fire. We got a rapid fire questions round coming right up. Robbie, are you ready for this?
I am ready, locked and loaded.
Locked and loaded. All right, let's do this. The number one. What is the one hobby that you wish you got into?
Ooh, I would have to probably say flying, like
Mm,
being a pilot. I always thought it'd be so beautiful and majestic to see the sunsets in the Pacific, or a
yeah.
sunset for that matter in Scotland. And I've seen this, from a bird's eye as a on the ground, let's say in Honolulu or in May in Scotland. It'd
Yeah.
be a wholly different matter seeing that from an airplane.
I totally agree, man. That's something that I want to do myself. I've connected with a local pilots club called the Smokehouse Pilots Club. They're about 5,000 pilots from around the U.S. that come together and meet, and I've had the opportunity to go visit one of their meetups, and it's really fun talking to other pilots, other fighter pilots. It's just like, whoa, you done this. And I've been a huge fan of flying airplanes. I've been just doing video game style, not really flying an actual plane, but it's fun to have that power of flight. All right, next up, what did you want to be when you were a child?
Oh, goodness. I think it was a combination here. It was archaeologist because I wanted to find the Loch Ness monster and un- de-encrypt or solve for why the pyramids were even there, for example. Then I also wanted to actually be a rock star.
Hmm. And you were
And by
you
today's standards, an artist, rock star is a very passe. It's just a very passe description.
yeah,
So artist is a more broad, mature view of, you have art, you have music,
yeah,
you have acting, you have impersonation, you have all these different things that one could do. I just always felt very creatively inclined.
nice. I love that because you did become a rock star. You rocked lots of stages. All right, next
That is
up.
true.
And one thing I want to say, you mentioned pyramids, and I was talking to my wife's nephew, and he mentioned that he had a chance to talk to a mathematician from Egypt. And he said the landscape was very different when they were building pyramids. Because think about it, these are actually tombs, or these are actually, they're graves. So they dug inside and they went that way. I'm like, really? That would be really interesting. So it's a really cool philosophy theory, but we don't really know how it all happened. Next up, what is your favorite movie or TV show?
Let me think on this one. I mean, I love Titanic for the romanticism of it
Mm-hmm.
and it being a period piece that seemed to be accurate. I think I love Unbroken because of the
Mm.
message, the moral message, and the conviction of those that were fighting for their cause
Yeah.
and the patriotism. I think I love When Harry Met Sally for its levity and its romantic humor.
Mm.
I guess I could say a lot about
A lot of different movies.
what was the other one? Yeah, I would even say Tom Hanks in the movie where he's like stranded on an island. Can you help me with that
Yeah,
title? It's been a while.
Castaway.
Castaway. Yeah, right. It's ingenious. How do you have a movie that rolls with hardly any dialogue for a big chunk of it, and then you've got basically a volleyball that becomes
Yeah.
a character? Like
There's there's a
brilliant.
lot there's a lot of character to be able to film that kind of film on deserted island with just one person. Like the budget would be, I mean, I don't even know what the budget was for that movie, but I bet it was really tiny. Like, we got to make a movie for $1 million. What can we do? Well, we could just go to the island. I mean, we could probably look it up on Big Box, how much actually money they spent to make that movie. But I mean, Tom Hanks played an excellent role with that movie, and I think after I watched that movie, I was like, oh my god, thank God, I'm out of the theater.
Right, like it's not us. We're not stuck with coconuts all day long,
Exactly.
right? Can we even get over
Oh my
the
god.
wake to get past the island with this like
No.
beat up,
Oh, it's crazy. So crazy. On that
Forrest
clock,
Gump, obviously.
yes, obviously, Tom Hanks has played some really wide variety of characters for sure. Which takes me to the next question. What movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it?
Ooh, obviously James Bond, because part of the way I approach the intelligence work in boring Fortune 100 tech companies
Yeah.
is to really not give a flying F about what senior leadership actually thought.
Hmm.
And that's part of the discipline. If you do the research well, and I mean really well,
Because that's why they brought you
and
in, right?
they brought me in because they knew I was essentially independent counsel that wouldn't put any politics into the mix. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have these pre-meetings where you go and sit down at the lunch table or in a quiet corner somewhere in the corporate campus and
Mm-hmm.
say, "Well, the forecast is a little off, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Or any of that. Like it was never any of that. It was always research based. It was
Yeah.
always based in fact that were referenceable, vetted sources, and we had to call it like it is.
Yeah.
That was the part of beauty of the role that I was allowed to serve, at least in intelligence leading, and thank God because you could get swept up in the politics if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
When sales results or marketing results are off, the business is always pressurized and
Yeah.
it's always a C-suite that's on the hook. And it's some C-level above them that are not always going to be happy or a board, perhaps. And you have to go in and be James Bond. You got to just call it like it is
That's
and
right.
take the stiff drink and move on.
Strip drink and move on. I think that should be the quote. Take a strip stick. Wait, what is this? What did you say? Take a
Use that
stiff
creative advantage now.
take a stiff drink and move on, bro. Um,
Hallelujah. Here's
next,
some alcohol right here if you need some isopropyl.
keep your
And
hands
this is
clean.
for my guitar luthering. It's not for what you think,
Right?
guys.
No, no.
I'm not
I
huffing it.
it's
Here it is right here.
there. You
My
go.
guitar color Pantone. There you go.
Wow, nice. All right, next up, who is your favorite superhero?
Ooh. I'm gonna go with the total antithetical superhero here. I'm gonna actually have to fess up and say I really dig Snoopy
Hmm. Who's Snoopy again?
because he's just so much fun. That's a hero to me when you're enjoying life and you can see things in a
Agreed. Yeah.
different lens and not really give a hoot.
He doesn't. He doesn't give a hoot. He just does what he wants. It's like, I'm gonna fly this
He's a beagle.
doghouse. I'm gonna fly this doghouse, and the bird flying. Like, what are you doing up here?
Right, right, right.
He is a character for sure. All right, next up and last fun question: if you were a board game, what would it be?
Mm. Well, I don't believe in conquering as much. I'm all about harmony, yet I also believe in capitalism. So I'd have to say probably Monopoly.
I
And that's just
mentioned,
because I appreciate ownership of private stuff.
yeah,
I appreciate free markets and I appreciate competition.
I love it, man. Robbie, thank you so much for your wisdom, your advice, your tips, your energy. This was a lot of fun, and I'm sure everybody learned a whole lot about competitive intelligence and bringing your creative passion to the workforce. Robbie, where can my
Think,
audience find you?
check me out on LinkedIn. That's Robert Zeas. And you can find me there and connect. And if you need any special projects or advisory services, that's where to reach me.
Awesome. I'll be sure to include the links to the show notes when this thing goes out. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you.
One love, one music, our world, Junaid, and we'll see you soon, my friend. God bless.
God bless. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around. We had a ton of fun talking with Robbie Phoenixx. Zeas, he's amazing. He's awesome. He's waiting for your connection. I mean, he's very busy, but if you have any needs in the expertise that he brings in, please feel free to reach out. The links will be in the show notes. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye-bye.